Thank you for joining us. And before we get started with today's video, if you guys like what you're seeing and hearing from the Locked On Senators podcast, go ahead and hit like, smash the subscribe button so you can be the first to know about Sens content. Now, we're going to be doing a ton of these prospect profiles, so if you agree this is someone the Sens should look at or steer clear, leave your comment below so we can hear from you. Now, we got 64 of these, so let's get into it.
Coming in at number 48, we are going to Sweden, to Elias Salomonsson. And that is a longer name, but a shorter guy. I guess he's 6 foot. He's 6 foot. We'll give him that. Offensive-minded defenseman. This is a guy who I really enjoyed watching his highlights.
Yeah, he's a Swedish defenseman, right shot, 6'1", about 183 pounds. And like most Swedish prospects we're talking about, we got to look at his stats from multiple different leagues, but the one we're going to focus on is the J20. That's where he had 35 games, 11 goals, 11 assists, good for 22 points. And something that's important to note about Salomonsson is he's one of the youngest players in the draft, Ross, at August 31st birthday. So there's a lot of reviews that say he wasn't quite able to elevate his game, and some scouts were saying they were really highly touted, featured him. And then as the season went on, they kind of downgraded just because he wasn't able to elevate his game. In fact, maybe he even got a little bit worse, which you got to give him a bit of leeway because he's a young defenseman trying to play in a pro league. He also had some time in the SHL, 10 games, no points. So I think he's someone that, since he's so young and hasn't quite figured out how to play a big game yet, he's going to need some time here to really know what he's got.
And again, we like looking at them playing against their own age group a little bit better, since that's what we get out of the CHL with those guys. They're mostly playing against guys their own age, maybe a couple years older. Whereas with Skellefteå, who Senators fans might remember, the home of David Rundblad, magic number 7 was absolutely ridiculous with Skellefteå's SHL team. But he only had 11 goals and 11 assists. But man, watching his highlights, the way he activated off the point really impressed me. He would get the puck, shimmy shake around 2 guys, and then put a wrister upstairs. I absolutely love how he's not afraid to take chances at the offensive blue line. And I didn't see a whole lot of turnovers, not that they would necessarily make the highlight reels like others would, but I just think as a whole, watching the way he patrols the offensive blue line and activates inside up to the hash marks to get those shots off, I actually really liked what I saw from Salomonsson.
Yeah, and he's a defenseman, Ross. How many times do you see this where he is able to score as many goals as assists? Like, to have it evened up, you can tell he's not afraid to shoot the puck, and he's got a decent shot. And I really think a lot of his problems are on the defensive side of the game. Like, when you're able to score at that pace, usually what happens is your defense is lacking. And that's what scouts seem to agree is he's got the tools, he's got great mobility, he's got a nice shot, he's able to make good reads, but defensively he still needs a lot of work. So I think he's going to be a project prospect.
Yes.
Like, a team could select him and hope he figures it out, and maybe after some development and some time and some growth, he will figure it out, or he doesn't fully figure it out, and he's one of those guys that just has a professional career in Sweden, which nothing wrong with that, but he's just not quite able to elevate his game to get to the greatest league in the world, the NHL. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if teams kind of say this is a high risk, high reward type of guy, and maybe they say we're not looking for that. But if you have the ability to take that kind of risk, I think it'd be a decent play because, again, he's so young. So you got to give him a little bit more time here.
Exactly. August 31st, as you put. I've got in my notes here, Pilsy, all the tools, but having trouble putting it all together. So similar to what you're saying there, like you can watch him in a glimpse or in a highlight pack like I did and get super excited about him. Like, he was roofing pucks from the blue line. And what impressed me most is after he activates the way I told you and beats one defender, he's still managing to find seams through other players. And I didn't see many shot blocks. And I was trying to find clips of like in-game highlights rather than just like the clips of his goals, because obviously that's just showing the best. And I still came away pretty impressed. Like, to me, he should be ahead of the guy who we're going to do next. I really like this player going forward. And for me, I know, that might be a little controversy. I hope so, but that's good. Let me get the rankings back here as I pull them up here, because this just shows you the diversity of rankings. We told you Bob McKenzie and Craig Button, despite both being with TSN, they are not on the same page when it comes to a lot of these prospects. Bob McKenzie has him at 33rd on his list, which isn't even the highest. We'll tell you in a moment. But Craig Button at 81, Pillsy, he doesn't think this guy's barely a third rounder.
And I think that's where Craig Button is. Again, he usually looks at it from the point of how do NHL teams and NHL scouts think. And he's probably saying, hey, this guy's too much of a project. NHL teams and scouts, they're not going to be that interested in him. Where Bob McKenzie has the flip side of that, saying, hey, if you got the time and patience to develop him, he could turn into something great.
Well, the other two entities that actually ranked him, we'll get to who didn't in a moment as well, but Scott Wheeler has him as a first-round talent, 26th on Scott Wheeler's list. I'll read you the blurb right after I tell you that Chris Peters has him at 42nd on his list. So again, this is such an intriguing draft. I don't know if the high-end skill is there past probably the top 7 or 8 guys, but you're looking at just whose horse are you betting on? And this is a horse I'd bet on because, as we said, he's got all the tools. Get him in a good development system and go from there. This is from Scott Wheeler's latest rankings. After impressing last season, Salomonson's draft year has been a little more polarizing, disappointing at the Halinkas, and then looking like he was trying to do too much in the J20 regular season. So that in itself tells me that he's a player that knows this was his draft year, and maybe he's trying to get a couple extra highlights for the scouts. I agree with Scott Wheeler. He says, I like him and think he's one of the better defensive prospects in this draft. He's got work to do to tighten up his positioning and his reads, but the thing he needs to tend worst on most are just about reps and maturity. So again, get this guy in the system, let him marinate maybe 2 more years over in Sweden at the SHL level, where he did get to play 10 games, but didn't produce at all, probably only playing 8 or 9 minutes or so at that top level. But I would look to bring him over as well, maybe even after 1 year. And if he can't quite cut it there, maybe you bring him over. I don't know who has his CHL rights, but see if the small ice service, if he's able to manipulate the offensive zone the same way he is over on the large ice in Sweden. But certainly there are some drawbacks in terms of the consistency. But as a fan of his, I'm going to spin zone that as saying give him an extra year that some of these players don't have.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think I would be a little more conservative. I think he's going to need 2 more years in Sweden, and I wouldn't bring him over till a little longer. But if you're a team that you're not rushed and you don't need entry-level contract guys to come play in your roster, why not take a chance on a young right-shot defenseman?
Exactly. That's just it. So let's pull up his elite prospects page here, as we like to do. Watch the show on YouTube. And if you're just getting into the draft rankings, we have a primer about how we do that. That's on our YouTube channel. We've got a specific playlist, 2022 NHL draft, and then the profiles that go along with it, each one individually. You can see the late birthday, 6'1", 183. Now, you might be like, wait, you just told me 6 feet. The height and weight that we're putting on the graphics is straight off the NHL Central Scouting page. I just figured that's where they're all listed on the same thing.
Yeah.
So that is the way
Makes
we're doing
sense.
it to have some consistency. But again, it alternates between 6 foot and 6'1". You can see the rankings there. Puck Authority, well, I'm not too familiar with, have them all the way up at 15. So that to me, pretty high. They've got him as a 2-way defenseman on EP Rinkside. But Pillsy, notice I didn't even mention elite prospects. They don't even have him in their top 96, dude.
Wow, that's surprising.
I know, isn't it? So look at this. Like, he's put up offensive numbers against his own age group going back to 14 points in 19 games. It's so insane how many games they play at different levels, right? Like,
it's crazy.
I have to scroll just to go back 3 seasons.
Yeah, we got to get a Swedish prospect scout or analyst to explain to us how that works and why they are so adamant on getting 10 games in every league for all these guys. It's crazy to me.
Now, another part that worries me a little bit is, look at this, Pillsy. 5 games, 1 point, and 29 penalty minutes. He must have just lost his marbles there at the U18. So for me, that's a bit of a red flag because his team won gold. You would expect him to be a decent part of it from the back end, but instead he only contributed the 1 assist, no goals in 5 games.
Yeah, and I think that was probably another reason where some scouts are saying a little bit disappointing for him this season. So, Ross, for me, Elias Salomonson is 3 stars out of 5.
Yeah, I've got him at 3.5. I'm
Okay.
obviously, I can just tell I'm a little bit higher on him than you. I just see the potential, and maybe I got my EK65 glasses on from over 10 years ago. And I'm not comparing the two. Just because they're Swedish and right shot and a bit undersized doesn't mean that they're the same player by any stretch of the imagination. But I just watched the way he activates off the blue line. And I really like that as a project later on in the, I would say, with that first second rounder for Ottawa, I'd probably be like, really? Like maybe you're leaving some talent on the table
Yeah.
otherwise. But I could find myself getting on board with it. So I'm going 3.5 stars for Elias Salomonson.